When I first heard I was going to be speaking at TED, it was about 6 weeks ago, I immediately started typing my script. And it's been an obsession ever since. I don't know about the other speakers, but... And I was saying to my wife yesterday that it's not ready. It just doesn't feel right. You know, when something doesn't feel right, she said, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. You know, this was yesterday, right? There's people in this room thinking, that's not what we rehearsed on Wednesday. And I said, you don't get it. This is TED. If this goes viral, it's career-defining. I'll be the next Simon Sinek, you know? And then I realized that I'd completely missed the point. That I'd forgotten my purpose in this. And so I'm going to flip the script. I woke up, I was on my bike this morning, I'm going to talk about something different. And I think we are losing our purpose in society. You know, purpose is about meaning in our life. It's about staying engaged and, you know, when things are tough. And it's about connection. And I'd lost that connection with you. It had become about me and not you. Yeah? So I'm going to talk about that for a bit. I think whether you are an athlete or a teacher or a parent or running a business, we cannot operate at our full potential without purpose. Now, I was sharing this about 6 years ago in Canary Wharf with a group of traders. Now, I just want you to picture the room. It's 2009, and they're just starting their career in trading in the city. Okay, so the crisis just hit, and I'm in there and I'm talking about purpose, right? And to be fair to them, they were getting into it, they started to get the idea, but there was this chap in the corner of my eye throughout the whole session, and he was just heckling me throughout the day. Just wasn't getting it. In his words, this is fluffy bollocks. And this continued. Anyway, in the afternoon, he said to me, he said, Andrew, you've been talking about purpose all day. You've been talking about asking us why we do, what gets us out of bed every day. He said, what do you do? What gets you out of bed? You know, why do you do what you do? What's your purpose? Which is a fair question to ask the person who's talking about purpose, right? And I knew the answer because I'd reflected on it in the past. And I said to him, do you remember the Rocky films? Do you remember the Rocky films? Yeah. Rocky 5, Tommy Gunn. I said, that's the worst. I said, I remember that film. I remember watching it. It was a Sunday night. It was 1993, March 21st. I remember watching that film. And Sundays in my house are pretty standard. I would have been out all day playing street hockey. I'd have been at Safeway's car park in Tunbridge Wells. I still call it Safeways. I'd been playing all day. I'd have come home, had a roast dinner with my family, and we'd have watched sport. It would have been cricket, football, golf, or snooker. One of those four, depending on the time of year. And this night I was watching. My dad loved sport. He was a baker. My granddad was a baker. And I always expected the business to be mine. But when I was 11, my dad sold the business. He sold it. So that was kind of the end of that. I still feel like a baker. But he started, to be fair to him, he made a lot of money. He moved into construction. And we had this wonderful, he made big houses in Tunbridge Wells. We had this wonderful big house. And we had, the fancy holidays to Portobello, all that kind of Marbella, all that nice stuff. We had this wonderful E-type Jag, blue E-type Jag that used to sit on the drive. But as quickly as he made all his money, he lost a lot. It was the mid-'80s, and that's what happened in construction. Lost it, and our lives changed like that. And on this Sunday night, he came to the door, and I was watching this film, and he said to me, I'm going to bed. Come and give your dad a hug. And I said, no, you've had a drink. He said, come and give me a hug. I said, no. And he went to bed. I didn't. And he went to bed, and that was the last time I saw him. He died of a heart attack, age 48. And I looked at this guy, and I said, do you know that 20% of people die in the early hours of a Monday morning, brought on by the stress and anxiety and fear of facing work the next day. I said, I don't want that to happen to you or anybody. That's why I do what I do. That shut him up. I feel blessed to live in Tunbridge Wells, actually, because I grew up playing street hockey in Tunbridge Wells, and I got my first stick when I was 9, and it changed my life forever. I was 9 years old. I played other sports, but I think, Paul was talking about giving children an opportunity. 80% of young people, young 14-year-olds, will become disengaged with sport, 80%, because they're looking for alternatives, and we're not offering it. But I was lucky, because I found street hockey. And I went on this extraordinary journey with the Tunbridge Wells Street Cruisers, and we would play all over Europe. We would drive out to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, we'd go out to Düsseldorf and play in these roller hockey tournaments out there, out into the mountains of Switzerland. We even went off to Chicago to play in Chicago. We had we didn't have very much money. We had to save our pennies. In fact, when we used to go to Europe, we used to rent a transit van. We used to put our hockey bags in the back and put mattresses on top. So we'd go out, and that would be our accommodation for the weekend. We were the first team, believe it or not. The first Tunbridge Wells Street Cruisers was the first team in '95 to switch from traditional roller skates, quads, to rollerblades, because we thought it would give us a competitive advantage. It was a disaster. But what happened is that people thought it was hilarious because the first tournament we played in, we came last, and this was in Switzerland. And everyone thought we were crazy for doing it. They couldn't understand why we'd made this transition until, of course, we started winning. And in '98, the Tunbridge Wells Street Cruisers beat the Düsseldorf Rams in the final of the championship. Now, if you speak to the team and say, tell me about your experience, it's very rare that they'll talk about the winning. Winning's great. It's a wonderful feeling, winning. But if you ask them, they'll talk about the sacrifice, they'll talk about the road trips. Obviously, I can't tell you the stories because you know the rules. They'll talk about the fact that we owned it, that we shaped it. It was ours. We didn't have a coach or a manager telling us where to be, what to do. It was all self-directed by us. And the following 10, 15 years, I played in 12 World Championships for Team Great Britain at inline hockey. I was to and from America playing, and in 2010, I took on the head coaching job for Team Great Britain. And I'd acquired a team that had lost in the quarterfinals of Pool B in the World Championships. Pool B is essentially like Division 2, and Pool A is the top 8 countries in the world. So Sweden, Czech Republic, Canada, USA, etc. The top ice hockey countries that come across. And so I'd noticed that they'd become a bit disengaged with playing for their country, having lost to Australia in the quarterfinals the year before in Pool B. So I was going to go in there, all guns blazing as head coach, and I was going to create the exact same culture as I'd experienced with the Tunbridge Wells Street Cruisers. The problem is you cannot take one culture and put it on another. It just doesn't work, right? And that was my experience. So I had to rethink what I was doing with the team and think about putting a different set of rules in. And these are the 5 rules I'm going to share with you that I put in place that for me have helped create an environment where everybody can absolutely thrive. And I think we all have a responsibility to create that type of environment. So the first thing we did with the Team GB is that they needed their own story. They needed their own story, not one that I was trying to force on. Our story happened over 10 years. It was organic. You can't just recreate that. But I had 9 months before the World Championships. And their story, what they came up with, was that they wanted to look, act, and feel like a Pool A team. To look, act, and feel. Not to win the gold medal in Pool B, but to look, act, and feel. That was their vision for the team. Now, I couldn't go in and say, well, if you want that, you need to eat better, you need to train harder, because you still get resistance. So I promised myself that I would not tell them to do anything. And I would just ask them. If that's what you want to achieve, I would just ask them the questions. There were some things I had to put in place around strategy and how we would play the game, but I wanted them to come forward with everything, for them to thrive and really own it, like we had. The other thing is I wanted to create leaders in the team, in Team Great Britain. I didn't want followers are good for the ego. They're not good for business, right? They're not good for sustaining change. They're not good for creating a high performance culture. So I wanted to create leaders, and that's my captains. I always say to you, you need your captains, you need your assistant captains out there. You need people who can influence change. And we needed change. The other thing is, I promised that we would embrace failure. Absolutely embrace it, because what I could see was a group of players who were paralyzed by the fear of failure, and it was preventing them from playing at their full potential. So we said, we'll embrace it. Embrace the unknown. When the street cruiser switched to rollerblades, it was a failure. But we came back stronger and we ended up winning. And when you take a risk, it's going to go one of two ways, isn't it? It's going to be a really good experience and you learn from it, or it might be a not so great experience and you learn from it, right? So either way, it's a bonus. The other thing is, if you can do all of that, then we could hold each other accountable. We could look each other in the eye and feel absolutely trusted that we would do what we said we would do. Now, the problems that I'm seeing, which is driving disengagement, is that I see it in education, I see it in businesses, is that we are focused on that, holding people accountable. Businesses are getting better, and the reason why they're getting better is because they realize that if you engage people, if you help them find their purpose, it means they're more productive, they will be more engaged, and that means more profit. Organizations like that. In sports, we're seeing athletes as a commodity, which is driving personal greed and corporate greed and corruption, as we've seen recently with FIFA, because we're just focused on performance. In schools, we're seeing academic robots on a conveyor belt to something they don't know where they're going, because that's what they're being told what to do, because they're being held accountable. What's this one? That's a D grade. Send it back. Yeah, the system is not working. And we need to rethink how we can create an environment where everybody can thrive, feel inspired, and operate at their full potential. So I've shared my story with you. I'd like you to think about what your story is and what you can do to help others thrive in this world. Thank you.